Hello there and good evening. I'm Karim Zachary and you're watching World News Program on All 24 News Channel from the capital Algiers. Next up are the headlines. In Gaza, new Zionist attacks kill and wound several Palestinians. The occupation breaches the Sharm el-Sheikh document just a day after its signing. And the World Health Organization says around 16,000 patients urgently need evacuation. Coming up next, the UN calls for a national dialogue in Libya to open a new chapter. The UN envoy urges Libyans to step up as Algeria renews calls for foreign mercenaries to leave immediately. Also in our news, the Kremlin welcomes Trump's push to end the war in Ukraine. The US President will meet Zelensky on Friday to resume talks with Russia, while Moscow says it's taken a new town in Donetsk. And later on, China starts imposing port fees on US ships. Beijing demands honesty from Washington and defends its export controls, while the US accuses China of deflecting from its weak economy. All this and more shortly. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, at least 7 Palestinians have been killed and several others injured after Zionist forces targeted displaced people in both southern and northern Gaza. Medical sources are saying 5 were killed while inspecting what's left of their homes in Shujaiya neighborhood east of Gaza City. 2 more died in a drone strike on Khan Yunis, and others were hit by occupation fire near Rafah. This comes as the occupation forces violated the ceasefire for the 5th straight day, opening fire in several areas and flying drones low over the strip, causing more casualties. On a similar note, Gaza Civil Defense says it has recovered the bodies of 250 people since the ceasefire began. Spokesman Mahmoud Basal says more than 10,000 bodies are still trapped under the rubble, with rescue teams unable to reach them because they don't have the right equipment. He also warned that unexploded bombs and war remnants pose a serious threat to people across the Strip. The Red Cross has handed over the bodies of 45 Palestinians to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis after the Zionist entity released them as part of the prisoner exchange deal. The hospital confirmed it's the first batch of bodies belonging to people who were kidnapped and died under torture or execution during the war. Medical teams are now working to identify the victims. In the same context, the Red Cross says returning the bodies of Israeli prisoners and Palestinian martyrs killed in the Gaza war will take time. Spokesman Christian Carden called the process a huge challenge, given the scale of destruction and the difficulty of finding remains under the rubble. He warned it could take days or even weeks, and some bodies may never be recovered.
There is clear indication that this might take much more time because of the difficulty to find the human remains in Gaza in particular. That's the case for the human remains of hostages, but in general, human remains, as we've discussed before, that may be under the rubble, considering the intensity of the conflict over the last days, particularly in Gaza City. Now, are they in Gaza City? Are they in the south of the Gaza Strip? Are they in the middle of the Gaza Strip? These are information that we don't have.
Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry says 44 bodies, including 38 recovered and 29 wounded, have been brought to hospitals in the past 24 hours. The ministry reports that the death toll from the war has climbed to 67,913, with at least 170,134 injured. Dozens are still missing under the rubble and scattered on the streets. Still with the Gaza file, several recently released Palestinian prisoners described their time in Zionist detention as being in a slaughterhouse. Many spoke of beating, starvation, and humiliation, saying conditions worsened dramatically after October 7, 2023. Their stories reveal a mix of shock and relief, shock at the torture and neglect they endured, and relief at finally regaining their freedom after years behind bars. Rights groups say that testimonies point to systematic abuse inside Israeli prisons.
We can sum it up in just 2 sentences. They have no humanity, absolutely none. These young people were simply asking for the most basic rights while suffering from severe skin diseases. You'd have to see it with your own eyes to truly grasp the reality, the conditions, the illnesses they were enduring. It's beyond words. People were dying. The conditions in the occupation's prisons are horrific. The torture is beyond description. We felt like we died and came back to life. There was no food, no water at all. Every day brought more oppression, beatings, insults, humiliation. As you can see, they don't even allow us to change our clothes. The situation is absolutely catastrophic. May God help the prisoners in the occupation's prisons. The conditions they face are extremely harsh. They endure daily torture, living in constant fear, hunger and anxiety. This is the reality inside the occupation's prisons, and there are no words that can truly capture the suffering.
In the meantime, the World Health Organization says more than 15,600 patients in Gaza need urgent medical evacuation. In a statement on Tuesday, it added that over 15,000 people have lost limbs during the war. The World Health Organization is urging for medical corridors to be reopened and for stronger disease surveillance to prevent outbreaks in the Strip. Meanwhile, the UN Development Program estimates rebuilding Gaza will cost around $70 billion. It warned the recovery will be long and complicated, likely taking decades, even with pledged aid. More details with Karim Mustafawi now.
After 2 years of continuous Zionist bombing and genocide, the Gaza Strip has become the most tragic humanitarian disasters of our time. The death toll has now exceeded 67,800 martyrs, with nearly 170,000 injured. Yet, these heartbreaking numbers tell only one part of this story. According to a UN official, at least 55 million tons of rubble now blanket Gaza. The scale of destruction is so vast that reconstruction could take decades.
So the estimated damage and rubble throughout the whole of Gaza is in the region of 55 million tons. Another way to put it, apart from the example from Central Park that I mentioned, is also equal to 13 pyramids in Giza.
According to UN estimate, rebuilding Gaza will require around $70 billion. Several countries are expected to participate in the reconstruction of the devastated enclave.
The European Union and the World Bank estimate that about $70 billion will be required for the reconstruction of Gaza. That means that also in the next 3 years, about $20 billion will be required. Countries have already indicated that they are willing to complement their existing funding for rebuilding efforts in Gaza.
While rebuilding Gaza might take decades for its people, the struggle to simply survive is happening right now. The challenge is real, as access to clean water is scarce, basic services are stretched beyond their limit, and the list goes on.
Moving on now to another regional story. The UN Special Representative in Libya, Hannah Tate, says preparations are underway for a national dialogue that brings together all segments of society to help move the political process forward. Speaking to the UN Security Council, she said that talks will focus on 4 key areas: governance, the economy, security, and national reconciliation.
UNSMIL is steadily advancing its preparations for a structured dialogue, a platform through which broader segments of Libyan society can participate and contribute to shaping key elements of an inclusive political process, I beg your pardon. We plan on convening the structured dialogue in November, both in plenary sessions and in 4 thematic dialogue groups: governance, economy, security, national reconciliation, and human rights.
Similarly, Hannah Tate warned that Libya cannot afford any more delays in the political roadmap meant to unify state institutions and pave the way for presidential and legislative elections. She urged Libyan leaders to engage seriously, take responsibility, and push forward the first steps needed to make the elections happen. Let's take a listen.
Libya cannot afford continued delays or disruptions in the completion of the roadmap. I call on all Libyan leaders to engage constructively in their efforts to ensure that the first steps in the roadmap are completed within the next month to allow for the preparations towards elections. I strongly urge that the representatives of the House of Representatives and the High State Council expedite their work and shoulder their responsibility in completing these 2 initial milestones of the roadmap.
Similarly, Algeria's UN Permanent Representative Amar Benjama has urged the immediate and full withdrawal of foreign mercenaries from Libya amid rising clashes in parts of the country. Speaking on behalf of the African group at the UN Security Council, he stressed that a political solution depends on ending foreign interference, blocking peace and stability. He also underlined the A3+ group's support for completing municipal elections and called on all Libyan parties to take part in the political process.
A political solution in Libya remains elusive in the face of growing external interference. This situation is further aggravated by a significant flow of arms and fuel smuggling in a blatant disregard of relevant Security Council resolution. We therefore demand the immediate withdrawal of all foreign forces, foreign fighters, and mercenaries. Libya's foreign sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity must be respected.
And in other regional news, the Community of Latin America and Caribbean States, or CELAC, has reaffirmed its support for a just and lasting political solution in Western Sahara. Speaking for the bloc, representatives from Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Guyana voiced strong backing for the UN's efforts to secure the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. They also expressed confidence in pushing forward meaningful negotiations between the 2 sides.
In line with these decisions, we continue to support the efforts of the Secretary General and his personal envoy to achieve a fair, lasting, acceptable, and mutually agreed upon solution. A political solution that will guarantee the right to self-determination for the Sahrawi people of Western Sahara, in accordance with the resolutions consistent with the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, including General Assembly Resolution 1514, as well as all other relevant resolutions.
In the same context, Cuba has reaffirmed its rejection of what it calls unilateral decisions that ignore the rights of the Sahrawi people and violate international law. Speaking at the UN Special Political Committee on Decolonization, the Cuban representative urged a just and lasting solution to the Western Sahara conflict that guarantees the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination in line with UN Resolution 15 and 14.
We call for a just, lasting, and mutually acceptable solution which would lead to the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara in accordance with Resolution 1514 of the UN General Assembly on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. Assembly, Security Council, and the African Union have reaffirmed the right of self-determination of the Sahrawi people. We do not favor unilateral decisions which overlook the interests and rights of the Sahrawi people, including autonomy without sovereignty, which violates international law, violates the UN Charter and Resolutions 1514 and 2625. The Sahrawi people can always count on the solidarity of Cuba in defense of their right to self-determination.
Still with regional news, this time in Morocco, where Generation Z movement has announced it will resume nationwide protests this Saturday. In a statement on Monday, the group urged people to take to the streets to demand better education and healthcare, fight corruption, and call for the release of all prisoners of conscience arrested in recent demonstrations.
After responsible internal discussions and a broad voting process involving the movement's members, it has been decided to continue the peaceful protest approach and to expand its forms. The movement announces the development of its advocacy methods, foremost among them the expansion of the product boycott campaign previously launched. The objectives and mechanisms of this campaign will be detailed progressively. We also reaffirm our demands for the right to qualified education, decent healthcare for all, the fight against corruption, the principle of accountability, and the immediate release of all detainees arrested for their peaceful participation.
And in national news, Algeria has drawn major Gulf investors into its energy sector, a move that reflects growing confidence in Algeria's business climate and cements its role as a key or reliable energy partner. Here's Zahra Farjani now with the report.
Numerous leading Gulf countries are making their way into Algeria's energy sector, driven by growing confidence in the country's business climate and bold legislative reforms. A dynamic shift that reaffirms Algeria's position as a strategic partner and a secure, profitable destination for international investments. In the country's south, specifically in the Elysee region, Qatar Energy has marked a historic entry into the Algerian market after winning an exploration license in partnership with Total Energies. The agreement, part of Algeria's first international licensing round in over a decade, includes a committee investment of $114 million. As Algeria redefines its energy strategy to align with global transformations, another major milestone was achieved with the signing of one of the largest investment contracts in recent years. Sonatrach and Saudi Arabia's Midad Energy North Africa sealed a $5.4 billion joint production deal extending over 30 years, underscoring a long-term commitment and deep trust in Algeria's ability to ensure both stability and profitability. From a more technical standpoint, Oman has chosen to enter through the service gateway. Abraj Energy Services and Sonatrach have established a strategic partnership to create a joint venture specializing in integrating oilfield services, a move that enhances operational efficiency and paves the way for technology transfer. The growing flow of Gulf investments into Algeria stands as a clear testament to the success of the country's diversification strategy, cementing its status as an attractive energy hub, offering strong returns and a dynamic investor-friendly environment.
Moving on now to other topical news, Russia has welcomed President Donald Trump's push to seek a peaceful end to the war in Ukraine following the Gaza ceasefire deal. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow remains open to talks and values any show of political will to find solutions. He noted, however, that dialogue with Washington is currently stalled, even as Trump weighs supplying Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. U.S. media say President Donald Trump will meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky next Friday. A Ukrainian delegation led by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko is set to arrive in Washington ahead of the talks. The meeting is expected to focus on air defense, more U.S. arms for Ukraine, and the possibility of bringing Russia back to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry says its forces have captured the town of Balagan in Donetsk as they push deeper into Ukrainian defenses. It also claims its air defenses shut down 195 Ukrainian drones in the past 24 hours. According to RIA Novosti, Russian forces carried out precision strikes on transport, fuel, and energy sites across Ukraine. In the same context, Polish Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski warned on Tuesday that Europe must be ready for a possible Russian strike deep inside the continent. Speaking in London alongside his British counterpart, It criticized NATO for not building strong enough defenses to shield its eastern flank from Russian drone attacks, calling it irresponsible. Moving on now to the trade war file. China has started imposing port fees on ships owned by U.S. entities built in the U.S. or flying the American flag. State media say the fees apply to the first port of call or the first 5 voyages each year. The billing cycle kicks off on April 17th, and failure to pay will delay import and export procedures for the affected vessels. In the same context, China's Commerce Ministry has urged the U.S. to show real sincerity in trade talks and work toward easing tensions. In a statement on Tuesday, it defended its export controls as legal and not a total ban, saying applications will still be approved case by case. Beijing said Washington was informed in advance through official channels. It also slammed the U.S. threat to impose 100% tariffs, calling it harmful to both sides and damaging to the dialogue climate.
We call on the United States to demonstrate genuine goodwill in the upcoming trade negotiations and to work with us in Beijing to achieve mutual understanding and rapprochement. We emphasize that our export controls are legitimate measures. It should be clear that these controls do not constitute a blanket ban. We will continue to approve applications that meet all required conditions. We have also fulfilled our obligations by informing the American side of these measures in advance through bilateral dialogue channels dedicated to export controls.
For his part, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has accused China of trying to distract from its weak economy and boost its leverage ahead of next month's Trump-Xi meeting in South Korea. Speaking to Fox Business, he said the summit is still on track for late October as both sides work to ease tensions over tariffs and export controls. He also noted there were extensive contacts between Washington and Beijing over the weekend.
The Chinese economy is very weak, and they may be trying to distract from this situation. Second, China, unlike the United States, seeks peace in the world. China is funding the war. China's purchase of Russian oil is funding the Russian war machine. They're buying Iranian oil, and we've criticized them very strongly for this. So maybe that was to distract from that. Third, it may be a misguided attempt to gain leverage before the two leaders meet in Korea in October, and I would argue that trying to gain leverage before a meeting with Donald Trump is a bad idea.
And finally, it's time to catch up on other news stories making headlines in the News in Brief, this time signed by Yassine Rikti. Let's follow.
Madagascar's parliament voted to impeach President Andry Rajoelina, who fled abroad amid mass protests. An elite military unit has assumed power following the vote, which passed 130-1. The crisis escalated after Rajoelina attempted to dissolve the National Assembly by decree just hours before his removal. Sudanese military sources confirmed that Rapid Support Forces launched a drone attack on Daba in northern state, killing 5 civilians and injuring others. Local media reported the drone targeted security services and a joint force, escalating tensions in the ongoing conflict.
L'accord de Bougival.
French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced the suspension of the pension reform law until the May 2027 presidential elections. Speaking to Parliament, he said the delay allows for parliamentary review and improvements amid widespread protests and growing public opposition to the reform. Algeria, already World Cup qualified, pressured Uganda throughout. A handball by Mukwala led to a penalty converted by Mohamed Amoura in the 81st minute, leveling the match to 2-1. Uganda remains 18 points, 7 behind Algeria, falling out of playoff contention.
And with this, we reach the end of our news for tonight. You can always catch up on our news stories and other stories that are breaking from our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Zachary. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.